The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this week. My name is Tanya, and I'm the marketing manager over here at Truss Solutions. Just for those of you who are new with us today, MWF, or Metal Wood Framer, is our automated Revit wall, floor, ceiling, and truss framing software for light gauge steel and also wood modeling. Today's session will be led by our senior technician, Christina. She'll be covering some of the new and exciting features available within our latest release. That includes custom sheathing layouts for Multilayer, the new Marker Manager UI, the Splice tool for wood, Multilayer Edits Wand for sheathing layers, multiple anchor bolt families, and much more. Just before we get going, I'd just like to remind everyone that at the end of the webinar, we'll be taking a few live questions. In order to be selected, please press the raise hand button on the dashboard. Just please also make sure that your mic is working correctly. If you'd prefer, you can also ask questions throughout the webinar in the questions tab of the GoToWebinar dashboard. We'll make sure to get back to you by email within 24 hours. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to hand off to Christina now.
All right, thanks a lot, Tanya. Hey, everyone, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world. So for today, like Tanya mentioned, we're going to be covering all of the new features that are going to be in this release, which we just released a couple of hours ago. So I'm going to work today in a wood project specifically, but the majority of these new features are going to be applicable to both light gauge and wood, regardless of which of the softwares you're in. But if there is any kind of distinctions, I'll of course just highlight that as I go along. So let's just dive right in. And like Tanya mentioned, if you guys do have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them at the end of the webinar. So we'll start off with arguably one of my favorite new things, and that is kind of our new overhauled marker manager. So this is just going to make things a lot easier on the eyes when we start looking through our markers. Essentially, everything has pictures now. There are some new renaming options that we just renamed with the markers, so it gives you a better idea as to what exactly they are. And just a lot more user-friendly and easier to sift through. The other nice thing with the marker manager is that you can always change the preview image. So if you do make any kind of modifications and you want it to reflect what your marker actually looks like, you can even upload your own photo. So just a nice little overhaul to the marker manager. And anyone who's maybe newer to MWF, this will just increase the learning curve a little bit, sifting through all of this. So everything in the marker manager has been overhauled. So all of our wall markers as well, the framing, split markers are all going to be here in subcategories, which will be nice. The joins also got a nice little facelift. So just some new images to kind of sift through. A little bit easier on the eyes. And then all of the rule sets as well are now in this project tab with varying images. So again, gives you a little bit of a better idea as to what each rule set can do. So this is really it for the kind of updated marker manager, just a lot easier to sift through, but majority of the markers are exactly the same. Just talking about markers, since we're in here, we did add also kind of a custom request that we got, was just a pretty simple vent opening marker. So both options there in light gauge and in wood. But it's really a very simple marker where you can just control the header, the sill, and the king family. By default, it will use whatever you have set up in your panel's properties. So there's no need to kind of make 17 different markers if it's just the sizing that's changing. But the main use for this is just the cutback options. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to a quick wall panel where I have this set up. And I'll do it for the wood one here. But you can put in your own custom cutback options, positive or negative values. And it's just going to override whatever kind of cutback options you have in the panel's properties, and of course, just take on what's in that marker. So a nice little marker that you guys can utilize, might also be useful for beam pockets as well, but simple little new one that we've went ahead and added in. So one of, I think, the main overhauls that we did that's new to the software are some improvements that we've done to multilayer. So to start off, I'm just going to jump in the settings. And we've added a new way that you can kind of map your templates to your walls. So up until now, it was pretty simple enough. It was just done by Revit wall type, and you associate the different templates to your individual layers. But if you do have one template that you want to associate to multiple different wall types, instead of kind of having to sift through this and associate it 10 different times, we do have a parameter option now. So this is done by instance parameter. You can add in your own instance parameters to your wall types, but I'm just going to go ahead and pick the simplest one. I'll put something in the comments. And basically what this lets me do is that I can select a bunch of different wall types. So I've got multiple types selected. I can go into the comments. Maybe these are all going to be 2x6 walls. And then when I get back into my settings, I've got my parameters. I've got 2x6, and then I can just go ahead and associate those templates to the subsequent layers. So super simple. The only thing really just to keep in mind, of course, is that your wall types are set up exactly how we have it here. So you just do need a structural layer. The layers on either side do have to be substrates. But other than that, you can really associate whichever template you want to that layer. And then exact same workflow, you just grab your walls and create. So again, just a handy little option. If you do want to reuse the same template to a few different wall types, I'd probably just go ahead and set it up by parameter. The other nice thing with the parameter option is that maybe you guys noticed that we do have options to export this to an Excel file. So I can quickly just go ahead and export this. Let's maybe call it multi-layer map. And this basically does two things. It's a nice little summary that you can see outside of Revit of how your templates are linked to the parameter. So it's just a nice summary. But if you did also want to kind of add in the parameters and associate it to the templates, you can even do it within this Excel list. So it could be done outside of Revit, could be done completely separate. And then as long as everything does match up, the templates exist, the parameters exist, you can always go ahead and re-import this, and it'll be associated to those wall types. So the only thing I'm going to do really is just associate it to my 2x4 interior wall type. I've already got 2x4 there in the comments on a few of my walls. I can go ahead and save this. Just of course make sure if you are working in the Excel that you kind of keep the text types and formatting exactly the same. So that's why I just like to do a straight copy paste. But I can go ahead and save that, import it. You'll see your imports complete. Gives you the path to where exactly that Excel file is. And it's basically just auto-filling these options for you. So if you do want to do it outside of Revit separately, you can do it in the Excel file. Again, just make sure, of course, that the templates exist and the parameters exist. But that's all there really is to the mapping option. A nice little option if you don't want to go by wall types necessarily. But what is probably the biggest feature that we've added for multi-layer is that we do now have sheathing edits. So for anyone who's of course used multi-layer, I'm sure you know by now that you are kind of limited to what's in your template. So you're limited to one sheathing family, you're limited to a particular type of layout, but we do have this custom option now, which basically lets you align your sheathing however you like. You can have multiple different types in one panel. And if you go to your wall properties and edit a particular wall, in the layout option, there'll be this custom button that you can click. So the custom button is exactly that. It just gives you options to customize the sheathing. So one of the first options that we have are just the break lines. So where your sheathing is actually going to line up. So in this case, for my wood panel, if you have double top plates or double bottom plates, if you did want to change the break location of your sheet, you can have it hit the center, the bottom. You can even do it by custom offset. So if you want a really specific location where that sheet is going to place, positive or negative values just to move it about that line. So super simple. You can, of course, do the same thing with your bottom plate or your bottom track. And then it's basically just an option here to add in some custom sheathing from member to member. So maybe I can run this from E1 to, let's say, S2. Just picking up your BMSF label. You've got your same break line options to choose where that's going to lap, same offset options. But this is basically just going to create custom sheets as you add in and customize your sheathing. So you can go ahead and associate a new sheathing type as well, a new material if you wanted to. But you can just add that, and then you can really keep on adding as many different sheets as you need to. And you can continuously just add them to your list. So nice little options just to be able to customize it and freely move the sheets around as you need to. And then probably the nicest thing with all this is that there is now an Edits Wand functionality that supports the sheathing. So for anyone who's used the Edits Wand, it just means that you can kind of freely copy paste things, move the shape handles, edit it in Revit, and then you can just run the Edits Wand and it'll save that to your panel. So I can really just copy paste this. I'm free to move the shape handles around if I need to. And then I can go ahead and run the Edits Wand. You'll have a sheathing option now. All of your edits will save, and then this will survive a regen. So it's a really nice new feature that we've added in. You could pretty much create your sheathing and customize it however you need to. You can copy paste, move things around. If you wanted to go about it this way, and then these all will survive a regen with that edits wand. So the nice thing with this as well is that if you are maybe running the sheet from member to member and it goes beyond the 4-foot width, you will get a pop-up message saying that maybe your sheet is a bit too small for the bays that you're trying to align it to. If there is some kind of overlap, it will tell you as well. So if we do go into the panel's properties now and go to the sheathing options, everything that I just did manually in Revit is also going to be listed here. So if you did want to undo something or adjust the offsets, you could always just come in here, adjust that offset, and then update the sheet as well. So I've got a little bit of an overlap, so it is giving me that pop-up, just so you're completely aware. So these are the options that we've added in with multi-layer. And I definitely think you'll get some nice use out of this. You can completely freehand your sheathing now if you wanted to and make those edits. So next thing we're going to focus on is just some general edits that we've done to the structural layer. So some new features and some things that we've improved just overall. And one thing that we have gotten requests a lot of the time for is new splicing options for wood. So for anyone who, of course, is creating wood panels, wood wall panels, or maybe is in modular, this will definitely help quite a bit and just makes a lot more sense overall than our previous splicing option. So with this, it's pretty similar to what we had before. You just enable the splices, but now you can splice the top and bottom track separately. You can splice your double plates. You can force it to splice on a secondary stud. There's minimums, of course, so if your track is going to be a minimum length, minimum distance between splices, and then you just put in the shop lengths that you want. But super simple, it will never splice on top of each other. So if you have double top plates, the splices will never overlap. And just a nice splicing tool for wood overall to just replace what we had previously. So another handy little feature, if you did maybe want to add in a vertical backing member, something in this wall. In extra studs now, we do have a little checkbox where it could split automatically if ever it hits some blocking. So this is super simple. I can force it to split, add this to my list. And it'll just automatically give you 2 pieces, of course, instead of just the one singular stud that it would have placed beforehand. So just a nice little option that we've added in, and this is both on the light gauge and on the wood side. So that kind of brings me to the next option that we've added in, which kind of ties in with this rotated vertical member. For anyone who's punching their studs, either for CNC or if you just want to model in some service holes for plumbing, electrical, of course, things like that. If you are adding in the hole types by vertically spacing, we have 2 extra options now to punch these rotated members. So I've got my hole type added in, I've got my spacing set up. I can say punch only the rotated studs. And then I'm also just going to force the hole type themselves to be on the center line and on the right orientation. So that's exactly what that little checkbox does. Basically just rotates the hole. So I can add that to my list. And then the other nice thing, this wasn't here before, but now it is, so it'll make things a little bit easier, is we do have an update button. Simple but effective. You don't have to remove and re-add everything anymore. You can just go ahead and quickly update it. So just a nice handy little feature that we've added in to be able to punch out rotated members. You don't have to run it by marker line anymore. You can just kind of add it in your vertical spacing. So the next thing I'm going to focus on is a little bit light gauge specific. But for anyone who's adding in horizontals in the panel's properties, so directly through this command here, we basically added in an extensions option now. So what this is going to do is if you do add in any extra members, if you add in a stud pack or if you copy paste, previously the extensions would only kind of hit the first member and stop there. Now with the extensions, any studs that it finds within these tolerance values, it'll just automatically extend. So for anyone who's rolling to a CNC machine, these extensions will of course upload to Onyx. You'll get the proper web notches, and it'll just speed things up a little bit for those horizontal pieces. So to give you guys an idea, if I were to maybe just triple up this member, let's maybe add it in through the Edits wand over here. So this is kind of how it would have behaved previously. Finds the closest member and stops there, doesn't actually do, excuse me, the full extension to the furthest member. So instead of having to manually edit these pieces now, in the horizontals, you can just enable the extensions. And then if members do fall within that 3-inch tolerance, it'll just be updated. So simple enough, but for anyone who's rolling this with CNC, it will speed things up quite a bit. So this pretty much goes for stud packs, like I mentioned. If you do copy paste and add in a new member, it'll apply for this case as well. My stud was actually within that 3-inch tolerance, so it didn't break it up into a smaller piece. So let me maybe extend that a little bit more. And there we go. It'll give you that separate piece automatically and adjust all of the remaining pieces of blocking. So this was a nice little example. If it is within that tolerance, it will give you the extra piece. But in this case, because it was within my 3-inch tolerance that I had set up, it just extends your horizontal to the next member within that tolerance. So simple command, but it'll extend with any typical stud. It'll also extend to your end studs and through your cripples. So last thing that I just want to show off modeling wise. Simple, but again, pretty handy, is for anyone who's using anchors and hold downs. We just added in a new option now where you can add in multiple different types of anchors. So this was another request that we got pretty frequently. But basically, if I go ahead and insert some anchor bolts, you can select multiple different types. You can copy our existing one and duplicate it to make different types. But it basically just lets you swap out or add additional different types of anchors. And these will survive the edits wands. You can add them within the panel's properties. Just a handy little extra option. So last few little things just to wrap up for today's webinar. One thing I wanted to highlight in the shop drawings. The shop drawings themselves are pretty similar to our previous release, but we do just have a new directory option. So anyone who set up the shop drawings will know that it's kind of annoying that you have to sift through the installation folder all the time just to find your sheets and to find your title blocks and set up that root directory. But now you can pretty much set it up to any type of path. So you can save your title blocks and your sheets really anywhere on your PC, and you can just set up that directory automatically. So that's just a nice little update that we did for the shop drawings. But one shop drawing update for the floors in particular that I wanted to highlight is just in the plan view. So this was another request that I got pretty frequently, is that when you are creating shop drawings for floors, there's not a whole lot of control on how they actually get laid out. It's really just finding that red arrow, and that's what's going to be pointed upwards, and that's how we lay the floor panel. So what you can do now is if you do go into the plan view, there's just going to be a new panel orientation option. It's super simple, but it'll give you exactly what you want for your floors, depending on how you want them laid out. And we basically just take the longest member in the panel, which in this case is just going to be the rim board, and we'll rotate it about that member. So I can rotate it clockwise, counterclockwise. And if you did want to lay it out, maybe showing the underside of the floor instead, you do always have the option to flip it as well. So let's just rotate that about the longest member, and we'll rotate it clockwise. So simple enough. It's just some options so you can orient your floor and get it set up exactly how you want it to look. So just to wrap up for today, just thought I'd go ahead and show a little bit of updates that we did to the trusses as well, particularly to the engineering. So anyone who's on advanced metal will have access to these. But the first thing we did in the fabrication reports, simple enough, but now there is kind of a landscape view of the truss, just a blown up image, so it'll be a lot easier to read, see the dimensions, see your screw counts as well. And then in terms of the screw counts, we did also update that in the properties. So if you actually go to your settings, where you ordinarily could have picked your screw type, you can also put in your minimum. You can choose if it's forced to be an even number of screws, but we basically left this up to the user. It was hard-coded before to be a minimum of 2, but now it's free to set up depending on your requirements. So this is one update we did for the analysis. And then the other nice thing that we did as well is depending on your building code, there we go. If you go to the Truss Designer folder in your installation folder, we do have the load combinations free to edit in a CSV folder. So depending which code you're on, if you're on ASD or LRFD, you can open up the Excel and you'll see all of the different types of load combinations that we have listed. You can change whatever you need to in here. This was all hard-coded before, so now it's free to edit. So that's going to be it for me today, guys. If there are any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them now.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Just as she mentioned, we have time to answer a couple of questions. If you'd like to pose a question live, please raise your hand now by clicking on the hand icon in the control panel. Just please also make sure that your mic is working correctly. Just while we wait for any questions to come through, I'd just like to remind everyone that the recording of the webinar will be sent through tomorrow. As always, please feel free to share the recording with any colleagues. And if you'd like to set up a one-on-one demonstration or have any follow-up questions, we highly encourage you to reach out to our team. Our contact details for our sales team will be provided with the recording. All right, we'll just give it a couple of seconds to see if any questions come through. All right, Christina, it looks like we have a question that came through. With the new build, are we able to associate multiple parameters to the panel?
You can always associate, or you can have multiple parameters. It's just for the actual mapping itself, it does just pick up on the singular parameter. So you can't have multiple parameters active at the same time. But if you did want to have multiple maps and you wanted to maybe activate them and frame them differently, you can always do that.
Okay, great, thank you. Have another couple of questions. Do the old markers still function in the new marker manager?
Yeah. So there really shouldn't be any major changes in terms of how your old markers worked before. It'll be completely fine. It's just going to be a new overhaul with the pictures. So that's the only thing that should really change. If you created any markers yourself, I think the actual default image will just appear blank. There won't be any image at all, but that's really the only change that you'll see.
Perfect, thank you. And last question, do you recommend to update the version in the middle of a project?
So this one's a tricky one to answer, but generally as a safety net, we do say that if you are in a version that is working completely fine for your project, unless there are any kind of major bug fixes that will be in this new build for you, then to keep the version that you're running, because once you do upgrade, you can't revert back. Now, that being said, if you did want to keep a project, just a copy of it off to the side as a safety, and then if you did want to upgrade, that is completely fine. There shouldn't be any major setbacks to upgrading. But if you are in the middle, generally, we recommend just keep the build that you're on if it's working fine for you.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Christina. That looks like that's a wrap for today. If there are any questions after we close the session, please feel free to email us. Our contact details will be available with the recording that's sent tomorrow. Once again, this new build is now available as of today. If you have any issues with the installation, please, again, don't hesitate to contact us. All right, we'll now be ending the webinar. Thank you again, Christina, and thank you to everyone who registered. Have a good day.